The protagonist never thought she would die this way. She could realize death, but she didn't realize who knew she was going to die as an offering. An unknown man told the protagonist that she was widely known as a devout and virtuous girl, thus honored as the savior of their empire. He said that by all accounts, she was now chosen to be the next sacrifice for the wicked dragon Rebes. Elaine thought that if she'd only known how it would end, she wouldn't have put up with it until now. She didn't understand why she was holding on and suffering, but Elaine decided she didn't care. She wondered how long she would have to wait. She didn't understand where, for God's sake, the evil dragon was. At that moment, a dragon appeared from above in the sky. The protagonist realized it was here. The dragon came very close to Elaine. The protagonist thought it was very big. At this point, she began to pray that God would allow her to die without suffering. At this point, the dragon said who knew he would live long enough to see such a thing. Elaine was surprised and looked at the dragon in wonder. At this point, the dragon asked the protagonist they had already met, haven't they? The main character was told by everyone that she had a terrible fate, and she believed that this would be the worst day of her life. Elaine asked the dragon in surprise what. She thought it best to say that she used to believe until she met Rebes. A few days earlier in a favela temple, a refectory for the poor. The unknown priest was looking for the protagonist and could not find her. At that moment, Ellen saw him and waved to him. She said she was serving food and asked if she could help. The priest said that when she finished serving the food, she should go to the laundry room and help. He said they needed more free hands. But Elaine said she had a lot more to do here. She said she had 200 dishes to serve and at least 400 plates to wash. She asked the priest why he shouldn't help her himself, but the priest said he wasn't the right person to do the job. Elaine was surprised and asked what he meant by such a job. She asked if he had become a priest because he wanted to follow the instructions of the god of their bar. Ella said that in that case, he didn't think he would live and work in comfort, did he? She asked if the bara taught them to live at a leisurely pace, counting psalms. Ella said that if the priest insisted that she go to the laundromat, at least he should distribute the food instead. The priest said that he had already said that he was not the right person to do such a job, but at that moment a plate flew into his head, and the unknown man said to hurry up and give them food. Elaine smiled at the people and said she'd be right with them. At that point, the father said he'd had enough. He said he was a busy man, so he would look for someone else. Elaine was frustrated because she realized that it was always the same people working while everyone else was fooling around. After a while, the protagonist finished hanging the bedding and said that was it for today. At that moment, she heard something strange. One man was beating another man, saying that he could eat less because he was smaller. But the man being beaten asked to be let go and said it was his food. At this point, Elaine approached them and asked them to let the man go. She said otherwise, making sure they weren't seen in the refectory again. The man who started the fight aggressively asked the protagonist who the hell she was, but Elaine said she was a sister of the Favelo temple. She asked if she could take it as an act of insult to the nobility. The man was frightened and said not to make him laugh. He asked what kind of nobility would work in such a place. He said that the protagonist didn't seem to know what an insult to nobility was. But at that moment, the protagonist started to pull out the pendant. She showed it to the man and asked why she would lie about such a thing. The man immediately bowed his head and apologized. He said he had never seen a woman work in such a place. He said it was his fault. Elaine told him that if he did it again, she would really make sure he was never seen here again. 2 unknown children were standing near the protagonist, and the brother asked his sister what the pendant was. The sister told him that it was called the emblem of the faithful. She told the brother that it was a badge of honor worn by the believers to distinguish themselves. Her brother asked her if it was true. He asked his sister but why she thought she knew she would work here. After a while, the girls had been washing plates so long that their hands were numb. One girl told the other that they had over 100 plates to wash. The other said it would never end. They washed so many dishes that their whole bodies ached. One girl said that this was the end of the year at the free refectory for the poor. She said to think that there were only 5 people left, which is to cook, serve, and clean up afterwards. But Elaine thanked the girls for their hard work. She said they could relax a little. She said they had to finish washing the dishes by the end of the day, and there was no hurry. The girls were fascinated by the protagonist. The first girl said she couldn't imagine what they would do when the main character left. The second girl said that's right. She said that Elaine's stay at the cathedral ends this year, right? The main character confirmed that. She said it's been 10 years since she came here. She said she'd be leaving them in a week. She said she was sorry. The first girl got upset and asked what her regrets were. The second girl said they wanted to say they were happy to be here with her. She said that nobles usually stay here for 5 years to study religion, but the protagonist stayed for another 5 years. At this point, Elaine Spryly didn't have news from Earl Newt. Elaine said she hadn't. At this point, the first girl asked the second girl why she had brought it up, but the second girl apologized and said she had forgotten. In the past, her uncle said she would be the one to go to the temple. The protagonist was surprised and asked again. Father said that was right. He said that she knew that at least one child from each noble family had to serve in the temple for at least 5 years. He said that Damon was originally supposed to go there, but he was the second heir to the Newt family. He said he still had a lot to learn, so the protagonist will go in his place. And her father told Elaine that she should be grateful that the family accepted her, despite the fact that she was the illegitimate child of an illegitimate family branch. So she should go and serve 5 years. But after the protagonist had been here for 5 years, no one came to take her away. And the Newt family left her for 5 more years beyond that. Elaine thought it was for the best. She thought that as soon as she finished her 10 years of service, she would be obliged to leave the temple, so she would pack up and leave without saying anything to the Newts. The protagonist has decided that she's going to go somewhere far away and start a new life, as free as she could be. At this point, the sky darkened and the girls wondered what was wrong. One of the girls asked if they thought it was somehow too dark for overcast weather. It was interesting, and she surmised that a massive fire had started somewhere far away. But at that moment, she saw something in the sky and thought it was a bird. Well, at that moment, the girls noticed it was a dragon and got scared. At that moment, the dragon began to speak. He said to be heard, people who are full of lies and pride. He said they must pay for their sins, for humiliating and sealing the sacred creatures for the last 500 years. He said that in 3 days, they would perish in the wrath of the black flames. The girls screamed that the wicked dragon Rebes had returned. The unholy dragon Rebes. He's the 44th dragon to appear in the history of the Kalian Empire. He's also the last and only dragon to return. 500 years ago, Rebes sowed havoc throughout the empire, making its inhabitants shake with fear, and was nicknamed the Unholy Dragon. It was eventually sealed by the greatest magician of the time, Lancer Aquinalos, and disappeared from history. And now, 500 years later, the announcement of the impending doom of the empire that came just after his return proves that he is still offended by past human deeds. The day before Elaine's appointment as a sacrifice, an unknown man asked to call the high priest Johann Favelo. The emperor asked the priest where the sacred knights were. The priest explained that due to the sudden activity of the monsters, all the knights had been sent to the southern regions of the empire. He said he had given orders for some of them to rush to the capital, but even the fastest knight would have a hard time getting here in 3 days. The emperor angrily asked how unreliable this sealing ritual was, that this dragon had returned. The priest was upset, for he had never imagined that the dragon seal would break on his watch. All this time they have been collecting the bones of God knows who, calling them the relics of the Lancer Aquinal and worshipping them as relics, claiming they can maintain the seal of the unholy dragon. They used them as an excuse to make believers out of nobles, and to charge the imperial court for guarding the seal. The priest realized that at this rate, the emperor would take his head before the unholy dragon destroyed the entire empire. He didn't know what to do now. At that moment, a girl came into his room and said that she had read a book about dragons because she cared for the empire, and had found one way to propitiate him. The priest told Karina that he would like to hear about this method however it may be. Karina said that in the past, when a dragon appeared, the people of those years probably respected its human sacrifice. When a sacrifice was made with the treasure the dragon liked, he would soon calm down after devouring that person and return to the lair with the jewelry. The priest said it was definitely worth a try. He said they had a lot of people on death row and they could pick someone. But Karina asked that they couldn't sacrifice some criminal, could they? She said that instead they should offer him a girl, chaste and faithful. The priest was surprised and asked if she meant to say that they should sacrifice a holy sister. Karina said that's what she saw in the chronicles. She said they offered a beautiful and pure virgin as a sacrifice. But the priest asked who among the sisters would agree to make such a sacrifice. Karina said it was an emergency for the whole empire and asked if they couldn't issue a decree and choose someone. The priest asked, but who exactly? Karina said we should choose someone among the sisters who had no parents, sisters, or brothers. She said that ideally, someone who knows the scriptures and understands the sacred significance of their sacrifice. And it's better to look among grown women than little girls. The priest thought we should have someone like the protagonist. He asked if perhaps someone from the Earl of Newt's family would agree to it. Karina said, of course. She said that besides, the imperial court knows that this heavy sacrifice for the Newt family goes beyond a sense of duty. She said that with this human sacrifice, they could buy enough time until the knights returned. She said that when they returned, they could be sure to defeat the dragon. The priest smiled and said that it was obvious that the future Earl of Newt had found himself an amazing wife. The day Elaine was chosen as a sacrifice. Elaine. They said she was chosen as a sacrifice. The protagonist asked, so they say that because she lived in faith and virtue, she is now a victim. At that moment, Karina told Elaine to take it as the greatest honor. She said that the protagonist was the most faithful and righteous of all the believers, and that is why she was honored. Karina said that of course they would do their best to remember the great sacrifice of the Holy Sister for future generations. Elaine told Karina that she had despised her for so long and now she had what she wanted, but Karina said it wasn't what she wanted. She said that it seemed the Count and her husband were just happy to hear the news. Ella didn't realize if even Lars could do that. She thought it was impossible, Lars was the only newt who didn't torment the protagonist, the only one who always listened when she needed to talk. Elaine thought it couldn't be, that he was happy to hear the news. Elaine was led through the crowd. People were surprised that they were really going to sacrifice this girl, but they thought she looked pretty mature and they didn't know if she was a virgin. But they thought at least she was quite pretty. Afterwards, the protagonist was locked in a cage. When Elaine looked up, she saw her uncle and Lars. Uncle said she should show the spirit of the newts, that she was doing it for the good of the empire and its people. He told her not to dare to show them such a pitiful look on her face. Uncle told Lars that he would go away for a while to meet the messenger. The protagonist cried and turned to Lars. She knew he would never leave her. At this point, Lars took Elaine's hand and said that he was excited for her to be a part of something big. He said that instead of being sold as a second wife to some old nobleman, he was sure it was a fate more worthy of her. Afterwards, Lars turned around and started to walk away. Elaine called out to him, but he just silently walked away. Elaine couldn't believe it. She was sure Lars would try to save her. She had put all her hopes in Lars, but at that moment, the unknown male announced that they should move out immediately. At that moment, the father turned to Lars and said that it was all thanks to Karina's brilliant idea. He said that they had managed to get rid of that useless girl to the best advantage. He said that once the dragon retreated, they would use the fact that one of their own kind had been victimized to claim substantial compensation from the temple and the imperial palace. He said that Lars and Karina would attend every social gathering they were invited to, and show everyone how devastated they were after this fuel sacrifice. Lars laughed a little and asked devastated. He thought that instead of watching another man steal Elaine from him, he would prefer that fate for her. And back to the present. Dragon asked Elaine if they were dating. Elaine asked if they were dating. But the dragon asked rather than her trying to pretend she didn't know him. The protagonist said that she knew he was the great lord of the Rabess. She said she read it in a history book. The dragon was surprised and asked in the history book. He said that the protagonist didn't seem to remember what was the person who broke his seal. The dragon soul turns back into an egg once it is sealed. It takes the blood and tears of a man to break that seal. The dragon told the protagonist that her blood and tears fell on the egg he was sealed in, and this allowed him to wake up. Elaine apologized but said she couldn't remember ever breaking the seal of Rabess's lord. Rabess explained that it had been a long time in human years, and perhaps she really had forgotten. But he said he had no doubt that she was the man who had awakened her. He said he wouldn't have been able to see the mark on her forehead otherwise. Dragon said that the mark was visible to him, as bound by contract to her and to the other monsters. He said it wasn't surprising that she didn't know about it. The protagonist was surprised and asked what contract he was talking about. The dragon explained that whoever freed the dragon from the seal was making a contract with him. The protagonist asked what had happened to her then, and she was now bound too. Rabess asked her not to talk about how the people of the current era don't know about it. He said he would grant her 3 wishes as her debtor. He said he was obliged to fulfill them, or she must live long enough to release them from the contract. The dragon told the protagonist to name her first wish. Elaine realized what it meant. She was bound by a contract to the dragon without her own knowledge, and was the one who prompted the empire's demise. She was sure she was asleep now. She thought she must have fainted before boarding the carriage. Ellen thought she might be braver since she was asleep. She asked if there was any difference in what wish she would make. Dragon said there are some limitations, but a lot can come true if it involves her. Elaine asked that the dragon not destroy the empire. She thought that with such a wish, she could take responsibility for awakening this destruction. Rabess asked if she didn't want him to destroy them. Elaine was frightened because she thought she had made the dragon angry. She thought he might be angry since she was stopping him from taking it away. The dragon said her wish would be granted. He said that if he destroyed the empire, she would be left all alone, which would be pretty useless. Elaine told the dragon that he was right about that. The dragon said that's what they would do then. He said he would refrain from destroying the empire while she was alive. Elaine was surprised and asked if it would be better to say forever. But Rabess asked if he didn't say the wish should concern her. He said that what happens to the world after she's dead shouldn't concern her. The protagonist thought that was pretty good. She thought she didn't want to make the dragon angry so that he would refuse to grant wishes at all. Rabess told the protagonist that to let her know that for the fulfillment of her wish, he would first have to get rid of the unholy energy he had stored in his body. So he has no other option but to go back to the beginning. Al was surprised and asked what back to the beginning meant. At this point, Rabess said that he must now fulfill her wish. At that moment, something began to happen above the protagonist's head. Elaine closed her eyes for she was very scared. After a while, Elaine was sitting near a tree. She woke up and realized something was wrong. At that moment, a rock flew into her head. The main character looked in the direction where the stone came from and saw 2 guys and a girl who said that the guy hit the bullseye. Elaine thought it couldn't be. She couldn't believe it. This was the protagonist from the days when she could barely get enough to eat at the Earl Newt's mansion. Elaine didn't understand how or why. She didn't realize how she'd ended up in Newton's garden again. The main character was born without her father in the country house of the Newton family. When her mother, Herself, the illegitimate child of a past earl, brought her home without her husband. Elaine was baptized by the stain of Newton's people as the illegitimate daughter's illegitimate granddaughter. After the main character was born, her mom became weaker and passed into the other world when she turned 7. Her uncle told her she was a bitch for killing her own mother. He said it was amazing whose blood flowed in her that she could kill her own mother. Auntie said Elaine's mom died after giving birth to such an ugly brat. The new head of the family and his wife despised the protagonist, which meant her cousins got away with her torment. Every day was filled with innumerable injuries and bruises from the attacks. The main character remembers it. It was her 16th birthday. Instead of congratulations, they just caused more injuries just like any other day. Elaine thought it would be better if she went back to the time when she lived in the temple. She thought that maybe she still had enough to eat, but at least she had 3 meals a day. But the protagonist didn't understand the reason for her return on this particular day. At that moment, little Rebes appeared. He said that even though it was the 3rd time, the shell annoyed him. Elaine asked if he was the Lord of Rebes. The dragon said he was. He said that now she remembered where and when they had first met. Elaine said she remembered that day, but she said she was sure he hadn't appeared like that in front of her. Rebes explained that it was because it took him too long to hatch after being sealed up for so long. But he said he was sure it wouldn't take long. He said she was probably already gone by the time he got out. Elaine remembered that, come to think of it, she had cried on the ground for a while, then got up and walked straight to the mansion. The protagonist asked the dragon if the stone Martin threw was a dragon egg. Rebes confirmed it. He said that if that human child had given his blood and tears to the egg, he would have been his partner, not the protagonist. At this point, Rebes asked if he could guess her second wish. He asked her if she wanted him to kill the people who abused her, but Elaine said that was wrong and asked him not to kill anyone. Rebes was surprised and asked why not. He said that those children had attacked first. He asked why she wasn't mad at them, but Elaine said she couldn't kill everyone around her just because she was angry with them. But the dragon said that only applies to those who don't have the power to do that. At this point, he said he forgot to tell me something. He said that as long as they're bound by the treaty, the protagonist can borrow some of his power, so she can kill whoever she wants. Elaine said that even so, she couldn't kill anyone. The dragon was even more surprised. He asked why. He asked if it was because she didn't want to waste her will on those people. He said he wouldn't be credited for the wish when she borrowed some power to kill a couple of people. He told Elaine to think of it as a bonus. He asked so now she wanted to kill them. Elaine thought the dragon sounded like he was selling something in a shop. She thought dragons were supposed to be sacred creatures, but he was acting like a child. Elaine realized that the way he talked about wish fulfillment was very suspicious. It also seems like his mannerisms have changed slightly since the first time I met him. He acts so cool and yet like a child at the same time. The main character didn't realize if it was because he is younger now. Elaine said that if she killed everyone who hurt her or made her angry, there would be no one left around her. Rebes said that then she could kill them all and asked what the problem was. He said there would still be a bunch of people left, even if she killed some of her entourage. But the protagonist explained that then the imperial court would send knights to arrest her. She said she didn't want to be drawn into something she was so clapped out about. The dragon said that then she should just become an empress. She said she could definitely fulfill such a wish. But Elaine said she definitely didn't want to become empress. She said her original wish was that he wouldn't destroy the world so much. She asked so why he moved them to this time. Elaine said her original wish was that the dragon would not destroy the world. She asked why he had brought them to this time. Rebes explained that it was just the easiest way. The protagonist asked what. Rebes explained that he realized he wasn't strong enough when he decided to destroy the country. It was then that he added something else to his mana to compensate, so it would increase his power. Elaine asked the other is what. Rebes said that if you simplify it, you can think of it as diabolical forces. He explained that when you fulfill a power with the help of another, it becomes very difficult to restrain the instincts to destroy. Elaine asked, and what? Rebes explained that if he wanted to restrain himself and not destroy Imperm, he had to purify his Manu from the influence of the other, but that would take some time. About 200 years, he said. Rebes explained that that was why he said it was the easiest way. He said that getting back to a point where his mana wasn't polluted was much easier. The protagonist didn't realize what the dragon was even saying. She was almost to the point where freedom was a step away, and now she'll have to live through those horrible times again. Elaine asked God what sins he was punishing her for, but at that moment Elaine realized that in her previous life she had suffered because she didn't know a better life. But now everything was different. She thought that maybe now she could live a different life. Elaine asked Rebes if he planned to stay here with her. Rebes was surprised and asked what she was getting at. He asked if she was thinking about dumping him again. But the protagonist asked who said she would leave him. Rebes said she did that last time. He said he tried very hard to get out of the egg and look around. He told the protagonist to imagine his surprise when there was not a soul around. Elaine got scared and said she didn't leave him. She said she just didn't know he was there. But at that moment, Rebes laughed and said he was just joking. He told the protagonist not to be so serious. Elaine thought that after the joke from the dragon, she had seen everything. Rebes sat on Elaine's shoulder and said that either way he would be by her side until he had fulfilled all 3 of her wishes. The protagonist asked if people would be frightened to see him, but the dragon explained that she was the only one who could see him now. A little later, the main character was walking somewhere with Artem and asked him, so now his mana is not polluted, right? Rebes confirmed it. Elaine asked if that means he won't destroy the Empire in the future, but the dragon asked what she was saying. He said he would burn everything to the ground as soon as she died. But the protagonist asked if he hadn't said he had almost no strength left. She asked if he wasn't going to reabsorb the other one, but Rebes said it was none of her business. Elaine asked him why he was so fixated on destroying the country. The dragon said it was because those people tricked him and locked him inside an egg for 500 years. He asked how he could forgive such humiliation, but Elaine said that was 500 years ago, and she said all the more reason to use the other one. It doesn't seem right for him. He said he could die from giving up that power, but he said he had to be willing to pay the price to achieve his goal. He said that if Elaine didn't like it now, let her try to turn him into a good dragon. Elaine asked, does that mean she can raise a good and kind parent dragon from a Rebes lord? And that could stop him from consuming another. Elaine asked, doesn't that mean he won't try to destroy the world, right? Rebes was surprised and said that naturally yes, but he asked the protagonist if she thought he would change his plans just because of a human girl like her. The Lord God has given everyone a special purpose, and those who have met their Maker after fulfilling it can rest in paradise lands of eternal joy and peace. This is what is written in the sacred scriptures. Previously, the protagonist believed that her purpose was to work in the refectory, laundry, yard, and other places. However, she realized that her true purpose might be something else entirely. Elaine thought maybe the real reason for her difficult childhood, or being sent to a temple monastery instead of her cousin, or going back in time after she was chosen as a sacrifice. Elaine thought that maybe it was all about her raising a good and virtuous dragon out of a wicked dragon, but the protagonist realized that perhaps raising a dragon would take a long time. Elaine thought that when he grows up to be kind, then she will use her last wish and ask him for a free life. Elaine told the dragon that she thought only time would tell if he would change his mind, but Rebes asked what she was talking about. The protagonist said that the dragon should then give her a chance to introduce herself properly. At that moment, she said her first and last name. Rebes responded by saying her name too, and the protagonist said it was nice to meet you. But Rebes told Elaine to hurry up and say her wish. He said there were only 2 wishes left, and he could probably fulfill them before sunset. But the protagonist asked how she could rush herself and miss such a chance. She said she had to think carefully before making a wish. Rebes was surprised and said that she could be cunning too. Elaine said that at least she was cunning enough to realize that the Lord of Rebes had a backup plan. Rebes said that was rubbish, and asked if she thought holy creatures were on the same level as humans. But Elaine said that since he was a holy being, she was sure he could understand her desire to handle those desires with care. Rebes was angry, but he sat on the protagonist's shoulder. Elaine thought he wasn't so bad after all. But more importantly now, she must live in the Earl of Newt's mansion again until she is sent to a convent. Elaine remembered that today was her 16th birthday, and she would enter the temple next March. She thought she should be grateful that she had another year and a half to leave this place. At this point, Rebes asked the protagonist what was wrong. Elaine explained that she thought it was necessary to wash off the blood before they went in. Elaine explained that she remembered what happened last time. She said her cousin Ellie was frightened by the sight of blood on her forehead, and her aunt reprimanded her. But she didn't punish anyone who hurt the protagonist. Rebes asked if it was true. At this point, Rebes started wagging his tail. After that, Elaine's wound healed. Rebes asked, not badly, really. He offered to go inside already. Elaine wondered if he had just cured her. The dragon said that since she was so amazed by something so insignificant, he thought she would still have to learn what it meant to be bound by a pact with a dragon. Elaine smiled and thanked Rebes. At that moment, Rebes remembered Elaine saying that she knew he had a backup plan. He thought that of course he did. He thought it was as if he hadn't had a backup plan in the first place. At first, he had a simple plan. After his release from the cage, he was to wipe this empire off the face of the earth. But plans changed as soon as he met the main character. After all, he felt in her the half of his heart that he had given away, gave to a certain Lancer Aquinel almost 500 years ago. In other words, Elaine is the reincarnation of his first bound contract, the only person he trusted, and the traitor who sealed it. Archimagus Lancer Aquinel. Rebes decided that once he was free of the seal, he would first take his mana core, half of the heart he had given to Lancer, and then destroy the entire empire. It was a plan he'd been hatching for 500 years. But when he awoke, he was angry because he didn't know where his core was. Not only had he not found his core, but he was also weakened after his long imprisonment. Rebes realized that he could not go on like this. He knew he had to regain his strength, even if he had to use another one. And so he spent the next 10 years looking for a source of other power, which was fast when compared to the amount of time he had lived in print. Rabes knew it would be difficult to purge himself of the absorbed magic, but he was so consumed with his revenge that he gave absolutely no thought to the future. And when he became a little stronger, after a short time he told the Empire of its impending doom. But when he saw the main character, he thought it couldn't be that she was a victim. The dragon thought he had given them 3 days to see the humans fight amongst themselves, but he realized that they had decided to try human sacrifice for the first time in 500 years. He thought perhaps it was a sign of the fall of their civilization. At that moment he saw Elaine's mark of the bound contract and the energy from his core. Rabes didn't think he'd lived long enough to see that Lancer would once again be the one who freed him. Lancer Aquinal. People have put him on a pedestal, calling him a legendary archmage. But to Rabes he is nothing more than a vile man who betrayed his trust. The world knows Lancer as a man, but originally he was a witch in persecution. Then she made a contract with the dragon right before she was burned at the stake. To fulfill her wish to live as a Lancer Aquinal, Rabes gave her part of his core, which is his heart, and transformed her into the form of a man. Despite everything he'd done for her, Lancer ended up using a seal spell on him. Of course, the dragon wasn't going to put up with it. He said that when he was free, they would meet again. When Rabes was imprisoned, he was able to use the rebirth curse on him. But he couldn't even imagine that his rebirth would become contractually bound to him and appear as his sacrifice. Rabes thought she would be surprised to see him. He thought he would be sure to mock her for everything. At that moment, he asked Elaine if they had met, hadn't they? But the protagonist asked if they had already seen each other. The dragon asked if she was trying to pretend she didn't know him. Elaine said that of course she knew him. She said she had read it in a history book. Rabes tried to make her remember by talking about the stages of seal breaking, but the protagonist didn't understand anything. Rabes realized that it seemed that the reincarnation of Lancer really didn't remember anything. Rabes thought maybe it was for the best. He realized that if the sly asshole remembered his old life, then he could use the contracted forces to taunt him. He is his nemesis, but the dragon has no choice but to fulfill his wish. So he thought about bringing back his memories after he had fulfilled his last wish, and take revenge by taking his core in the most brutal way possible. So Rabes thought it was for the best. But when he heard her first wish, he was able to purify his magic by traveling back in time before he absorbed the other, and restore the missing energy by regaining its core. That's what the dragon was thinking when it went back in time and hatched from the egg. He thought the main character looked just like Lancer when he first met her. He thought that meant her second wish would be exactly the same. He thought it would be easier than he thought. He asked Elaine if he could guess her wish. He asked if she wanted him to kill the people who were bullying her. But Elaine said it was wrong. She refused, even when he said he would kill them as a gift. She even offered to raise him into a good dragon. But Rabes didn't understand how. He didn't understand if these guys weren't constantly hurting her and doing serious damage. He didn't understand why she didn't kill them. Dragon really couldn't understand the main character. He didn't realize if it was a side effect of the reincarnation curse. He thought that she must have been born with a dementia. Now Rabes is really concerned that she might die before she tells him her last wish. Rabes realized that it was a law of nature that a weak wound dies, but it would be problematic for his contract. If the bound man died a natural death before naming all the wishes, then the contract would be cancelled. If it is a premature death, then the contract will continue in force, and the dragon will have to fulfill the remaining wishes after the person's reincarnation. That means if the protagonist dies, Rabes will have to wait for the third reincarnation of the Lancer. The very idea terrified him, and then he decided that he would watch the protagonist until she said her last wish. He thought he'd watch her for just a little while. Rabes thought it was ironic. He never imagined that the reincarnation of the cunning Lancer would be hollow. After a while, Rabes told Elaine that he wondered where they were exactly. The main character said this was her room. She said the room was exactly as she remembered it. Asked if she was laughing at him, right? But Elaine denied it and said she hadn't even started. At this point, Rabes told the protagonist that he could use the human form. He said that before his imprisonment, he lived as a human and learnt many things about the human world. Elaine was surprised and asked how. Rabes explained that he was leading up to the fact that he didn't know how put people lived, but he had never seen no live in such a musty old room. At this point, the protagonist said what he was talking about. She said you could tell she wasn't exactly a common noblewoman. The protagonist said that she wouldn't starve today after all, and it was all thanks to Rabes. But the dragon asked what she meant. Elaine explained that she had missed dinner in the past because she had let the others see her covered in blood. At this point, Rabes again asked Elaine if she was sure she didn't want to kill the people they had previously met. The protagonist said she was sure. She said she'd already talked about it. But he asked if she was sure she wasn't trying to act like a saint already. Elaine said she wasn't sure. She said it's not because she's a saint. She said she was just saying she shouldn't kill other people for any reason. But Rabes said he didn't think she fully understood. He said he would show her how she could borrow his strength. Elaine was surprised and asked again. Rabes began to tell her. He said it was pretty simple. He said the protagonist should just close her eyes and cast the spell, thinking of him. He told her to say Rakuro Rabes. Rabes explained that then his powers would sleep in Elaine, and she would smoothly expose the limit of what she could and could not perform. At this point, the protagonist asked if it was so easy to let her borrow his power. She asked if it doesn't devalue their desires, but Rabes said that they, humans, are all the same, jumping to strange conclusions, said she wasn't worried. He explained that she could only use a tiny fraction of his powers. He said she would realize as soon as it was used and let her try it. At that moment, the protagonist closed her eyes and thought that as long as she thought about the dragon, then everything was fine. At that moment, she cast a spell. At this time in the house, Martin told his sister that it was strange because he was sure he had seen everything. The sister asked if she knew well. She said she might, she erased it, but the brother said it didn't look like it. Martin asked what happened then. He said he'd seen her when she picked up dinner. He said it looked like she never had that wound. Martin said maybe they didn't get a good look. He said that next time he would make sure he hit it. His sister supported him and said she wanted to try throwing something too. At this point, Lars appeared and asked them what they would like to throw next. Martin was frightened and said it was no big deal. He said they wanted to see who could throw the stone the furthest. But Lars said he definitely heard Martin say that he would make sure to hit someone. At this point, Martin started making excuses. At this point, Lars asked Damon why not tell him what had happened. Damon said it was all the main character's fault. He said she was being very cheeky, even though she is a disgrace to their family. The sister said that the protagonist should be grateful but is still so cheeky. She said that's why Martin taught her a lesson. Lars asked Martin if they meant that he had thrown something at her and hit her. Martin said he did, but he said it was just a small pebble. He said she wasn't even hurt. But Lars told Martin that he was 17 years old and an adult. He asked when he would start behaving properly. He asked what his father and mother would think when they heard rumors about his bad behavior. Lars told Martin to remember that his younger sibling looks up to his actions, so he should be tougher on himself. He said that if they understood, they could go. Lars thought it would be very draining if the protagonist came to his room again. In front of everyone, she is silent and looks down at the floor. But Elaine often came into his room and mumbled something to herself on the tray. He thought she wasn't tattling, complaining about everything around her. Lars thought he would just continue to ignore her. Lars never understood why everyone reacted so strongly when it came to the main character. He thought they should just pretend she wasn't here. He thought it had been a hard day, and he'd better send her away as soon as she arrived. At this moment, the protagonist felt like she could do anything she wanted. Rabes asked her if she now realized how amazing these powers were. He told her to think about what she wanted to do right now. Elaine began to think what she wanted to do with Rabes, a lord's powers. Said she wanted to eat fresh baked white bread and hot soup with meat. Got angry and asked if that's what she wanted to waste his powers. Elaine apologized and said she was just hungry. But the dragon said he'd discuss it. He said he couldn't believe that such a weak-minded little thing was contractually bound to him. But Elaine said she wasn't weak-minded, and also suggested that we forget about it. Rabes said it was better than if she was a sly con artist, but told her to eat first. Afterwards, Rabes apologized that he couldn't turn it into anything better. Elaine was upset because she thought Rabes was very upset. She thought that maybe she had wished for something very ordinary. She thought that next time she would have to think of something more serious. At that moment, food appeared in front of the protagonist and she asked what happened. Rabes said that even he couldn't create something out of thin air, but he could remake existing things into something similar. He said it's a magic called transfiguration. The dragon said that if there was anything in the soup, he'd convert it into meat, but there's nothing there. But Elaine was glowing with happiness and said this soup was delicious. Rabes asked if she was telling the truth, but he said it wasn't meat. But the main character said the cream soup was delicious. She said she hadn't had white bread in a long time. She said she's at home, she's going to cry. Dragon said that to be honest, transfiguration is amazingly witchy. Elaine said it was. She said Rabes is the greatest dragon in the world. Later that evening, the protagonist sat on her bed and said she was very full. At this point, Elaine asked the dragon how he had grown so quickly into an adult dragon in only 10 years. But Rabes told the girl not to lower dragons to the level of other animals. He said that for them, the egg is just a shell that contains their souls. He said that their size and shape change as needed. He said they are not related to their age. Elaine asked if that meant he could stay in his little dragon form. Rabes said that not only could he be in dragon form, but he could also be in human form. At this point, Elaine said she wondered what he would look like in human form. Rabes said that if there is a look at what a lot of people like his appearance, chances are he looks pretty exciting. At this point, the protagonist was embarrassed and asked what he was saying. She said he probably meant to say she looked attractive, not arousing. But the dragon asked, "Isn't that the same thing?" Elaine said no. She said that just because he thinks a person is beautiful, it doesn't mean he finds them arousing. At this point, Rabes asked the protagonist in her past life if she wanted someone specific as her date. Elaine once again got embarrassed and said no. but the dragon said that now she was lying. Elaine became even more embarrassed and asked if he could recognize lies. But Rebes asked so she was lying. The main character said she wouldn't have said a couple, but she liked someone. And Rebes asked if it was a handsome man. The protagonist said he was handsome. Rebes said he was right after all. But the protagonist said she didn't like him just because of his looks. She said that even though she thought he was handsome, she did not let the thoughts develop further. But Rebes asked why not. The only Newt man who didn't hurt the protagonist. He never drove her away, even if she went round and round in circles like a fool. A cold young man, graceful and elegant in every way. He was so strong and unlike the protagonist, so majestic and full of confidence. A man the protagonist could not help but love. Elaine said that however she realized that she meant nothing to him. Rebes asked if it was true. He asked if she meant to say that the feelings she had for him were just one-sided sympathy. Elaine said that was right. Yes, he looked up and told her that it was quite difficult for him to understand human one-sided sympathy. The protagonist asked why it was difficult. Dragon said she should hide her feelings in front of someone, but the other person doesn't have to reciprocate them. And she is worth her expectations of a response from him. He asked if that was fair to the other person's friend. Elaine said it could be. Well, at this point, the dragon asked her if she had tried the mating dance. Elaine asked in surprise. Rebes said that it seemed to be something that birds do. He said that in any case, he was asking if she had confessed to this man that she liked him. The main character said she couldn't have done it. She said that besides, there are a lot of people in the world who hide their real feelings. At this point, Rebes realized that the longer they talked about it, the country it became. He told the protagonist that he doesn't have a very extensive knowledge of human relationships, so he's sure she's right. But the protagonist said she wasn't. She said she was right. She said it was just one-sided love, and she hoped he could reciprocate it. But she was disappointed when he realized. Elaine started crying and said it was all because she was being arrogant and didn't know her place. At this point, Rebes asked her to wait and said he didn't mean it. But the protagonist said she was even grateful that she realized it. She said she didn't want to make the same mistake this time. At this point, Rebes asked Elaine if he should make that guy fall in love with her. Elaine asked if he could control the human mind like that. Rebes said it wasn't that he could control it. He wanted to say that he could teach the protagonist the art of seduction through magic. Elaine asked if he meant to say that she should seduce Lars with magic. The dragon said he did. He said that's what seduction is used for. So he asked the main character to stop crying. She agreed and realized that Rebes was worried about her. But she said she didn't need to learn that magic. She said it was pointless trying to make it her own. Elaine said that besides, her feelings for him were long gone. Rebes asked, so what kind of person is this Lars? But the protagonist said it wasn't very important. She said she was more interested in finding out why Rebes disliked people so much. She asked if it was because of the magician who sealed him. Rebes said that story was different, but that of all the people he had not yet met anyone he could call decent. At this point, the protagonist asked what about her. Dragon sighed and said that with them being young people, everything was fine. But he said he's seen that the older people get, the more unscrupulous they are. But Elaine said there are some people who have no conscience from childhood. She thought her cousins who lived here were like that. Such were those of the convent who mocked her. Karina that reveled in the death of the protagonist and deeply despised her very childhood. The main character told the dragon that she would do anything she could for him, so he could overcome his hatred of humans. Rebes said to make sure she did her best then. Elaine wondered. After that, she hugged the dragon. Rebes asked what she was doing. The main character apologized if the dragon was uncomfortable, but Rebes told her to go on. Elaine began stroking the dragon with the thought that she never thought scales could be so soft. At this point, Rebes prompted that he had a strange feeling. Elaine asked if it was an unpleasant feeling, but Rebes said not really. This is the moment the protagonist kissed the dragon. Rebes immediately jumped up and asked what it was. The main character explained that a kiss on the forehead or cheek is considered a show of intimacy in humans. Dragon asked if she meant to say they were intimate. Elaine replied that not yet, but she would like them to be close. But Rebes said there's a contract between them as it is, and he doesn't think there are any people he'll be closer to than her. He told the protagonist to hug and kiss him again and then continue stroking him. Lars sat on the bed and pondered the fact that the protagonist hadn't turned up. At that moment, there was a knock on the room and Lars told them to come in. The butler came in and said that Lars hadn't locked the doors before going to bed. But the guy didn't do it because he thought the main character might come. He said he just forgot about it. Lars hoped that Martin hadn't lied when he said it wasn't anything serious. He thought that if it was, everything must be all right. Lars was drinking tea and reading something. He thought it seemed that the new head of the Favelo temple was quite capable. He greatly expanded his monastery during his 10 years in office. Lars thought that it must have been after he took office that Johann Favelo turned the whole temple upside down with his reforms, and found a 500-year-old ossuary in the basement of the monastery with the remains of Archmage Lancer Aquinal. The priest told the emperor that the seal that restrained the dragon was weak because they had not sufficiently honored and cared for the relics of Archmage Lancer Aquinal. He said that if the dragon broke free, it would bring destruction to the entire empire. His statement created the feeling that the dragon could break free at any moment, and he was able to instill this fear into the emperor's heart. Through such endeavors, the temple consolidated its position as a privileged temple in the imperial court, and had many privileges. In addition, the Favelo temple capitalized on the desire of noble families to outdo each other, and established a fashion for beliefs. Lars realized that because of this, the convent was now one of the most populated. But he wondered how many noble girls would be sent there next year. Going to a monastery is a common practice in the Kalai Empire, where religion is not in the last place. To demonstrate their piety, each noble family sends a child to the temple for service. If it is a boy, he is called a holy brother; if a girl, a holy sister. Such children carry with them the emblem of the faithful. They come to the temple when they are 15, 17 years old and return home only when they reach 20 years old. Lars thought it was likely that Damon would come from their family. Lars thought that excluding him, the heir to the family, as well as Martin, who would be too old for that, and Ellie, the only daughter in the family. Lars had hoped Damon would spend most of his time at the monastery building personal connections. At times like this, Lars thought that the main character would be more suitable for the role. He thought that at least she was smarter than the other children. He realized it seemed that her parents despised the fact of her existence, but he didn't think it wasn't necessary. Since they have Elaine, who is beautiful and intelligent, they should marry her off for future profit and lineage. Lars thought that with the right jewelry and makeup, he was sure she would have achieved a reputation as a beauty in high society. So they should bring her up and marry her off to a decent man. Lars realized that it might be a little late, but she was due to appear in high society sometime next year. He realized that her father and mother might not agree, but he thought that Elaine would be more valued on the marriage market than Ellie. Lars thought that later, when she came to see him, he would give her some chocolate. After a while, the protagonist brought Rebecca somewhere and he asked what that place was. The protagonist explained that this is where she lived with her mum when she was still alive. She said they came here because she suddenly remembered her. She said she didn't expect it to be so clean. Rebecca looked out the window, which was covered with chains, and said that it seemed to him that in this room a man was being held hostage. He asked the protagonist why they lived here locked up. He asked if her mum was a criminal, but Elaine said her mum was her grandfather's bastard child. The protagonist said that everything was fine while her grandfather was alive, but after his death and the coming of power in the hands of her uncle, they lived in misery. Rebecca wondered why. He asked if he didn't hate her because they had different mothers, but Elaine said it would be better if it was just hatred. She said it's still scary to think of her uncle from that time. The uncle told the protagonist's mother that he realized she was his destiny as soon as her father brought her here. But Mal fought the man's hand away and asked if he had lost his mind. And she said they were brother and sister, but her uncle said no one would remember her alone if she kept her head down. He said he would make her his and give her anything she wanted. But Mal told him to go away and asked how he could even think of such a thing. Rebecca told the main character that she had a nasty uncle. He said he couldn't believe it. But at that moment, Elaine said she was actually lying. She said her mum wasn't her grandfather's own daughter. She said her grandfather had bought her from a village where witches lived. Rebecca was surprised and asked what that meant. Elaine explained that Grandpa wanted to use magic in the family business, so he brought home her mum, a witch. They say he often used her mum's magic for his own purposes, and called her his daughter to make it more convenient to take her leading with him. Her mum didn't tell the heroine exactly what she was doing. The protagonist only knows that she was haunted by endless feelings of guilt and shame. But at the thought that with the money she received every month she could feed her family back home, she could not go against her grandfather's instructions. Rebecca asked if Elaine was not related to the Newt family by blood. Elaine said she was, but she said that in the end, no one could ever find out the whole truth. She said that grandfather died a sudden death due to a Kato collision, so uncle didn't find out from grandfather how things really were. And her mom asked the main character to never tell the truth. She said that the mere fact that she was a witch could make bad things happen to her. The only thing the 7-year-old protagonist could do was keep the truth a secret and live in the Newton household without giving any signs of life. After all, now that her mum is gone, if she were to be abandoned by Nyunt's family, she would really have nowhere to go. Rebecca asked Elaine if her mum had ever told her who her father was. She asked if she thought it would be better if she found her father and lived with him than to live like this. But the protagonist said her mum hadn't told her about him. The protagonist said that perhaps she was afraid that her uncle would find him and kill him, so she kept her father's identity a secret even from the protagonist. After all, if her uncle had threatened her at such a young age, she could have told him everything. Elaine told Rebecca that there was no need to create unnecessary drama. She said that the fact that she was born was enough tragedy. But Rebecca asked what the tragedy of her birth was. The protagonist revealed that her mum was a strong woman at first, but after she was born she weakened a lot. That's why her uncle hates the main character. Elaine told me that he said that not only was she born to a stranger, she killed her own mum. Rebecca said what a storyteller he is. He asked what kind of brat would accuse a child of his own mother's death. Rebecca said that if it wasn't for the main character, her mum would probably have died quicker because she would have just ended up committing suicide. Dragon said her mum only lived for Elaine. The protagonist was surprised and asked if it was true. Rebecca confirmed this. He said what's more important is whether the main character is okay. Elaine said it still hurts just thinking about her mum. She said that in her mind, mum was always sick. She said she came here and felt a little sad at the clear memories of her childhood. At this point, the protagonist said she wasn't really sad. Rebecca asked if that's why she came here. Is it because she misses her mum? But Elaine said it wasn't. She said she came to remember the suffering of that day. The protagonist said that she thought that if she did not want to repeat her unhappiness, she needed to be specific about what tormented her and why she was experiencing such emotions, so that she could overcome them later on. She killed her own mother with her birth. With these words, the uncle bullied the protagonist from the age of 7. Elaine said that after he said that, she thought she didn't have to worry anymore. She said he made her feel better and thanked the dragon. Rebecca turned away and said that he should not be thanked for his simple words. He said he was getting tired of it. At this point, the protagonist realized that it seems the dragon had been worried about her all along. She thought that's how she knew he wasn't an evil dragon all along. But at that moment, Rebecca told the protagonist that someone was coming. Elaine asked him what to do. She said she'd be told off if they knew she'd come in here. Rebecca explained that's why he told her he'd kill everyone here. But he said he'd just hide them himself. At that moment, my uncle entered the room. Rebecca told the protagonist not to let it show. At that moment, the protagonist noticed that the man was an uncle. He said he should clean up the place already. At this point, he walked over to the clothes wardrobe. Elaine realized that these were the clothes her mother had worn when she was alive, and was surprised that they had been there all along. At this point, the uncle started sniffing the clothes and remembering the protagonist's mum. He said that he should have gotten rid of this peerless girl despite her resistance. She said she should have died, not Marielle. He said if only she'd promised him she'd stay by his side. If only she'd promised she'd be his. Elaine didn't realize what she had just seen, but she guessed. The protagonist realized that her uncle actually wanted to kill her. At that moment, Rebecca told the protagonist to look this way. He asked if he had to kill the guy, but the protagonist silently shook her head. Rebecca got angry and asked how long he could build an angel for himself. He said that the death of such people on Earth would make it easier to breathe. But Elaine said you can't kill people. Rebecca said that no matter how you look at it, the deceased would never have wanted it. At that moment, Marielle's clothes began to disintegrate. Uncle remembered about the cupboard. He ran and opened it, but it was also empty inside. He didn't understand what had just happened. Uncle asked so-and-so as no one. He asked who was in charge of the building. Rebecca told the protagonist that he was off to accuse someone again. Elaine asked if a person could change so easily. Uncle found someone and shouted that they were scum who couldn't even do their job. He asked how clothes can rot in just 10 years. The maid asked if he was talking about the dresses in the wardrobe. She said it was fine yesterday, but the uncle asked if she meant to say that he was lying to her now. The count told them to go and check it out for themselves. Elaine told the dragon that they were now scolding the maids because of them. The dragon said that's why he said it would be easier if they just killed him. He said it's not hard to kill. At this point, the protagonist realized that Rebecca was originally an evil dragon who wanted to destroy the country. She thought that surely people's problems must seem pathetic to him. Not long ago, she thought it would be easy to complete her mission, but now it was getting harder. After a while, the protagonist got hungry. Rebecca said that every time around this time there was a strange sound coming from her stomach. He asked if it was because she was hungry, but the protagonist said they didn't. Rebecca said that if they don't, they have a problem. He said it meant she had a pain somewhere. But the main character said that dinner was just a little while ago, but she was already hungry. Rebecca asked if she thought it was because the portion was too small. The protagonist confirmed it. Dragon asked, wondering if they were giving her less on purpose. Auntie knocked the bowl out of Elaine's hands and said that people must have some conscience. She said it seems like the protagonist is getting too much food since she's throwing it away. At the time, Elaine thought she had indeed committed a serious misdemeanor, but now she knows that adults shouldn't behave like that towards children. If the protagonist lived her life eating only what she is given, she would definitely die, and more than once. At that moment, Rebecca said someone was coming. But still, the protagonist did not die and continued to live. At that moment, there was a knock on the room, and Rebecca asked if the girl wanted to open. He didn't even ask who was there. Elaine said she did. Because of the 4 knocks, she knew who was in there. There was a maid standing outside the door. She said Elaine must be hungry. She asked if she could come in for a second. The reason the protagonist didn't starve to death as a child was Emily the maid. Emily told the protagonist to eat the potatoes now. She said that they were cooked 2 days ago, so the sooner she ate them, the better. The main character thanked the maid. She thought she had missed her. Elaine remembered Emily for a long time, even after she got to the temple. She was the only one who cared for her, though she was ignored even by the maids. At first, Emily couldn't do anything for Elaine and was just there for her. After she gained experience and was promoted to kitchen maid, she began to help Elaine by bringing her leftover food so she wouldn't starve to death. However, when this came to the attention of the head maid, Emily was punished. The main character was cleaning up, and Karina told her that Emily had been kicked out of here without a letter of recommendation for stealing. Elaine surprised her, asked what. Karina asked, wondering if she didn't know. She said Emily's dad was a drunk and he didn't have any money, so he sold his daughter to one bar. The protagonist asked what she had just said. Karina said it was a shame, of course, because now Emily's life as a woman was over. She said that when she was sold to the brothel, now you see it was only a matter of time. She asked the main character who she thought it was because of. Emily asked Elaine how she's been doing lately. The main character said it was business as usual. Emily asked if she felt like she had a cold. The main character said no because she rarely gets sick. Emily said that was good. She said it was good that she didn't catch the others' colds. But she said that the main character remembered to sleep with a blanket. She said this room is very drafty. Looking at Emily, the protagonist clearly remembered that fear and despair. As soon as she heard about Emily being kicked out, she wanted to find her right away. But that would have been useless. After all, the protagonist couldn't change anything. But things are different now. Elaine said she had relied on Emily too much until then. She thanked her and said she had always wanted to do this. Emily was surprised and said she hadn't done anything wrong. But the protagonist said that now she may not bring her food. She said she's not allowed to bring her food. Amelia was surprised and asked why she was saying that. Elaine explained that the head maid would be watching her, and she probably already knew that Emily was carrying food for her. Elaine said she just had a feeling about it, so she asked me not to come back. Elaine said she was fine. She said she'll be better in the future. She said that maybe next year she'll be sent to the temple on behalf of the Newt family. Emily was surprised and asked if it was true. The main character said it was, but it was still not certain, so Emily must not tell anyone. But Emily said it's a long time before the temple admission period. Elaine said that's why we have to be careful until then. Elaine said that if Emily punished because of her, she'd be upset. But the maid asked the protagonist not to worry. She asked if she could be punished for such a minor matter. But Elaine has the maid do as she asks. She said she wouldn't pretend they didn't know each other. She said she wouldn't forget her. Emily said that since the protagonist urges her, she'll do whatever she asks. But she said if Elaine needed help, she could leave a candle by the window. Emily said then she would come to her room as soon as possible. At this point, the protagonist apologized to Emily for being powerless. She said that's what she wanted to tell her. After the maid left, Rebecca asked Elaine who the man was. He said that she would turn out to be nice compared to the other inhabitants of the house. The main character said that Emily was the only maid who helped her. She said she couldn't protect her in the past, but she wants to protect her this time. The protagonist asked the dragon if there was no way. But Rebecca asked who she thought he was. He said it was a piece of cake. He said it was so easy that it couldn't be counted as a wish. He said he wouldn't count the defense of the maid as a wish. But in return, he asked the protagonist to fulfill one request of his. He said that next year, when she went to the temple, she should find something and bring it to him. Elaine asked what he was talking about. But Rebecca said he would tell me when they were there. The uncle greeted Mrs. Heverin. Heverin also greeted the count. She told them to have a seat. She is Sasha Hebron, the emperor's mistress. The uncle said that her hotel had changed since the last reception. Sasha asked how he liked it. She said she had decorated it, reminiscing about her home. The count said it was done with very good taste. He said it was obvious she had a hand in it. The earl said it seems His Majesty will often visit her domain. But Sasha said she's still a long way from Miss Newt. Sasha Hro was an ordinary flower seller. The count told Lars that it had been 20 years since she had attracted the emperor and become his mistress. Lars asked how she had maintained her position for so long. The count said that the emperor-empress is in a marriage of convenience, so Sasha has managed to own the emperor and is very good at holding on to him. Lars said she's not an ordinary woman, but the count said she's not so special. He said that once she entered the social circles of the capital, she became the queen of society. She was on the level of the aristocracy. She followed the empress's instructions without question and earned herself a good reputation. The count said she was very cunning. Sasha's son is an Abel. The fact that he, being the son of a mistress, was able to enter the courtyard is an indicator of all of Sasha's tricks. But Lars said that in the end the throne belongs to the empress's daughter Aeneas. But the count said they didn't know that. He said that when Abel enters the palace after the empress dies, his ascension to the throne will only be a matter of time. Since Sasha is the emperor's favorite, she will be by his side. The count said that's why their family couldn't cut ties with Hebron. He said it was a woman and would provide them with power. He said she would be the new ruler of their country, ruled by the heir to the throne. Sasha thanked him for the stones given to her for her birthday. She asked if it was probably the count's wife's choice. The count said it was. He said she chose them herself. Sasha said that she thanked fate every time for her friendship with such beautiful people. She said that in their time it is very difficult to find a person you can trust, so people like the count are very important. The Count said he agreed. He said that lately unfounded rumors are spreading even in the society of noble gentlemen. Sasha asked, dare anyone say anything bad? The Count explained that he was talking about Count Armand. He said that every time he inadvertently tries to insert something about Princess Aeneas, he gets sick of it. Sasha asked if it was true. She said that she had heard that Count Armand's wife had recently had a tea party with Her Highness, the princess. She said that it was probably the princess's plan to lure the Count to her side, because the Count had recently started to make a good profit from the mining industry. But Sasha said she felt like she was in a hurry. She said that since she gave it to her, she'd start luring people to her side. The Count said that was most likely true. He asked who now had the imperial spirit and the support of many aristocrats. He said only Prince Abel. Sasha thanked the man for such words, but said that she and Abel were still far away from such a status. But the Duke told her not to worry, because he would help her. Sasha asked if she could ask a favor in that case. The Count agreed and said he would do anything. Sasha asked if he knew she liked gemstones. She said she sees them as a work of art. She said she had heard that the Count was good at them too. So Sasha asked the Count to let her visit their family vault. She said that she would like to see a very rare and valuable magical dragon stone. The Count asked in a frightened voice how she knew of such a thing. Sasha asked in surprise if it was a secret. She said that all the collectors of these stones knew about it. The Count said he was sorry, but he couldn't show her the stone right now. Sasha said that it seemed like she had asked for something inappropriate and apologized. But the Count said it wasn't like that. He said this stone is now lost. Sasha asked if he was lost. She asked how could it be. The Count explained that the former Count lost his mind before he died, and for that reason. But at that moment Lars interrupted him without letting him finish. The Count said that in general it was not the most pleasant story of their family, so he apologized that he could not tell everything in detail. Sasha told him that it must be hard for him to lose such a rare stone. She wished the Count to find their family religion. The Count said that as soon as they found it, he would invite her at once. After a while, Sasha came to Malik. She said there was trouble. Malik asked her what made her frown at such a beautiful face. Sasha explained what they were saying. Earl Newt's dragonstone was missing. She said she would have found out how he disappeared if it wasn't for his son. She said he stopped his father halfway through. Malik said that the head of the family is stupid, and asked if that's why his son goes everywhere with him as a stakeout. He told Sasha not to get angry because everything was going to work out for them. Sasha asked what it was. She said he wanted the stone. Malik said he was needed. He said the Count thinks they've lost him, which means whoever finds him can have him. Sasha said it would only be if they found it first. She asked what if they didn't. Malik said that the stone was definitely in their house. He said that this strong energy can still be clearly felt. Sasha asked what was the pretext for going into that house and searching for him, even if he was there. Malik said it would be good to find him without making too much noise, but if it didn't work out, you could always just kill everyone who lives there. After that, Sasha started laughing. But she asked Malik if he'd tell her why he wanted the stone. She said she could find him 1,000,000 others. But Malik asked why she would be interested in something that doesn't concern her. But Sasha said she was just very sad. She said she gave him the soul of her son Abel, and he still doesn't seem to trust her. But Malik laughed and said that very charming thoughts visit her pretty head. He said the reason he's looking for it is simple. He wants to get stronger, just this. He asked Sasha if she would be satisfied with that answer. Sasha said he was the only person with dragon roots on this earth. She asked if there was anyone stronger than him, but Malik said it wasn't enough for him. He asked Sasha if it wasn't good for her. He told her to keep helping him as she had done before. He said that then her wish would come true too, because she, his charming one, was the one he had a contract with. After that, they kissed. Rebes asked the protagonist what all the fuss was about. He asked if they were expecting visitors. Elaine said they must be. At that moment, she was cleaning the ladder. At this point, Rebes said that no one was following her and asked why she didn't ask him for help. He said that if she used his power, she would finish faster. But the protagonist said that if she finished too quickly, she would be suspected. She asked why she would use his power for such a simple thing. Rebes admitted it made sense. He said that if she was sorry to use his powers for such a simple job, then she wanted to become queen by using them. But Elaine said she didn't want to be queen. At this point, Rebes got angry and said that the protagonist was hopeless. He thought that even though she remembered nothing of her past life, the fact that she had the soul of a lancer in her remained unchanged. He didn't understand how the main character was able to change so much. Rebes thought the Lancer Aquinal wasn't like that. 300 years before Rebes met Lancer. While he was still asleep in the egg, he remembered perfectly the voices of the dragons who were preparing to leave the human world. The dragons said that the human population was growing rapidly, and that they continued to ruthlessly destroy nature for resources. They said that people were also killing each other and burning the land to increase their territory. The dragons realized that humans no longer worshipped God or nature, so they decided to end their coexistence with humans. The dragon elders gathered all the clans, as well as the magical nuclei scattered across the land, and then they were ready to leave the land. But at that moment, The egg that contained Rebes fell back into the human world. Earlier, the dragons thought that his egg was flatter and much smaller than a normal egg, which led to the conclusion that he was unlikely to hatch. In the end, the dragons decided to abandon him. For many years, trapped in an egg, he traveled to many places, studying people and the human world itself. Knowing this time, he has had time to form well and become old enough to be able to be born. The conditions of hatching from eggs not planted by a mother dragon are like breaking the seal on a contract with someone. Rebes A had no choice but to wait until he was offered such an opportunity, and one day, someone threw it at another person, and subsequently the blood and tears that flowed from it got on the egg. Then the conditions were fulfilled at that moment for the breaking of the seal, which, it would seem, would never be fulfilled at all. Rebes came out of his shell and said he was finally able to hatch. Rebes noticed the Lancer and said he was in a rather strange situation, so he suggested that we start with the most important thing. He said she's become his contractor so she can make 3 wishes of any kind. Rebes said he thought she should make her first wish as soon as possible, or she would die at this rate. At that moment, Lancer asked the dragon to save her, but Rebes asked if she would be content for him to just save her. He asked her what she thought. Maybe he should add one more item to her wish. That's when Lancer told Rebes to kill the people here. Rebes smiled, and I said he'd like that. He said he would be happy to fulfill her first wish. At that moment, the fire under the girl's feet suddenly went out. People were disturbed by this and did not understand what had happened, but they assumed it was the witch who had done it. They thought it looked like she had decided to do one last trick before she died. After that, the villagers decided they needed to stone her as soon as possible. But at that moment, Rebes appeared behind the girl. People were scared and didn't realize what kind of monster it was. Well, at this point, Rebes told them to be thankful for their good fortune and ripe to pepper him with his pity and death. When Rebes was killed, he went up to the girl and asked her how she was. He asked if she was happy that her wish had come true. At that moment, he turned into a small dragon and asked what her next wish would be. Lancer said you wanted to become so strong that no one else would be able to hurt her. And she asked Rebes if he could make her the greatest magician Vase in the whole empire. Rebes asked if the title of mage in this empire was only given to men. Lanza said it's true. She said that when such powers are wielded by a woman, they are immediately labeled witches. And also after it is discovered that they are witches, they are immediately burned at the stake. Rebes asked if she was a witch. Lancer said she was. And in what asked how they even knew, with her weak mania, that she was a witch. The girl replied that she had not been caught by them at all, and they immediately labeled her a witch. She said that it was because there was a plague in the village, and she, being poor and having no food to eat, had managed not to get infected. Rebes asked then if he could change her gender to male, but Lancer said that all she needs is for others to accept her as a man. After all, she doesn't really want to become a man. But Rebes said that as a woman, she would have to live her whole life pretending to be with a man. He asked if she was sure that's what she wanted. Lancer said she was more than sure. After all, she would rather live the rest of her life pretending to be a man than live as a woman who couldn't even support a family. In which he agreed and said that from now on she would look like a man in the eyes of others. Rebes said that now all that's left is the problem with mana. At this point, the dragon told the girl that she would turn out to be quite clever. He said that making her a powerful mage meant that she would later become stronger than any mage in the land. He said that with such great magical power, even if he could no longer fulfill her wish, she would be able to do it herself. Rebes told the girl that she had come to his liking, so he was willing to give her a part of his mana core, so that she could become stronger than any magician in the land. At this point, Lancer asked what a nucleus was. Rebes explained that it was his heart. He said he was going to take a piece of it and give it to her. Rebes asked her if she knew that dragons are the essence of mana. He said he only got a piece of his heart. She could become the greatest mage in the empire. Lancer asked if it could really be done that way. Well, I asked her what she was talking about. Lancer said he mentioned to the veteran that he planned to give her a piece of his heart. She asked if it would hurt him, but Rebes laughed and said it sounded very funny. He told the girl not to worry. He said that taking just a piece of his heart would not hurt him in any way, but he said what Lancer meant was that the moment she dared betray him, a piece of his core would return to him in the most painful way possible for her. Rebes never thought that he would give a piece of his heart as a human being, but he thought there was nothing wrong with that, because she was a very nice and good person. Rebes looked at the protagonist and thought she was like a cute, obedient dog. Rebes thought Lancer was a very clever man. Contract Rebesa appropriated the name Lancer Aquinal, and after making just 2 successful missions, her name became famous among the humans. During a drought, she filled the dried-up village wells, and also ruled with the bandits who did not give life to the common people. In addition to that, she took to extinguishing forest fires, which people without magic could not put out for 3 whole days. However, she did not do nothing but help the people all the time. She also, for money, took on missions, in which undesirable or simply interfering people had to be eliminated. On the job of finally getting a good reputation and gaining great fame, Lancer received a serious mission from the Emperor, becoming an imperial magician in the aftermath. There were always many interesting things happening to Lancer, so even Rebes was afraid that she would soon make her last wish, and he would no longer be able to be near her. Rebes thought there was something wrong with the protagonist. He still couldn't forget the look in her eyes with which she had asked to kill all the villagers, for unlike Elaine now, she was quite dodgy and very interesting, and how pleased she was at such a request. Elaine is the reincarnation of the Lancer, who is going through the same hardships as she did back then. But unlike her, Elaine didn't want to take revenge on the people who wanted to kill her. Rebes suggested that maybe it was because of the influence exerted in the temple. At this point, the protagonist told the dragon that he must be really bored and apologized. But Rebes said that if she was really sorry, she should finish cleaning. Elaine said that she was almost done and there was only a little bit left to do. But that's when her cousins came running. All muddy with laughter, they started running up the stairs. Martin told the protagonist that guests would be arriving soon and asked what she was doing here. He told her just to see how dirty the stairs were. Ellie asked the protagonist if all she had ever done was bang on the cormorant. At this point, they started calling her a lazy girl who's good for nothing. Rebes told Elaine that they had taken over again, and asked if she wanted him to start pushing their ladders. The main character remembered her cousins telling her that they would tell her mom because she didn't clean the stairs properly. They said she was always doing her job the wrong way. They called her a useless idiot and said all she did was laze around. In the past, Martin has asked the main character if she is holding back tears. He said she probably wanted to cry and told her to do it. The main character started crying and people started laughing at her. At this point, Martin asked Elaine if she was holding back tears again. He said she probably wanted to cry and let her do it. But at that moment, the protagonist realized that being a little girl, she didn't notice that they were acting like little children, although they had been adults for a long time. Now that she has grown up, their once terrifying threats and teasing no longer affect her in any way. The protagonist told Ruzan she wanted to ask them something. She asked if they were doing it on purpose. You gave it to her before she finished the job. She asked if they were following her. The protagonist said that she felt Cheeto's eyes on her, and when she went to change the water, she noticed with the corner of her eye that they were following her. She said that the guests should be arriving very soon, but apparently they were more worried about them than she was about them. Martin asked what kind of saucy speeches she dares to make, but Elaine said that, assuming that's not the case. She asked why they still hadn't changed their dirty clothes or taken a bath. I asked if they had so much time on their hands. I wondered if they had so much free time that they even decided to give up their jobs to torture others for the fun of it. Martin got angry and asked how dare she. After that, he kicked her with all his strength. But Rebes managed to help Elaine in time and ensured she landed softly. At that moment, the maids appeared and looked for the main character's Kuza, asking where they had run away to. They said that the children had gone out as soon as possible because they had to take a bath and change their clothes. They started to leave and Ellie hit the main character saying she was just lucky. At that moment, the protagonist thanked the dragon for his help. She said that if it hadn't been for him, she might have died after falling so high. But Rebes said he didn't understand at all. Elaine was surprised and asked what he was talking about. But Rebes said he didn't understand her at all. He asked why she didn't ask him to kill them. He asked what if they crossed the border again as they did now. But the protagonist said it wasn't like that. And Rebes asked what then. He asked if they would die without her help. He said they were sick with something or maybe an accident. But the protagonist said it wasn't like that. Rebes got angry and asked what then. Elaine replied that they were still children. But the dragon asked what else it meant. He asked if it made a difference. But the protagonist said that they were still small and didn't realize what they were doing. She said that they thought it was okay to bully her, and it was their parents' responsibility to raise them that way. But Rebes said that the oldest of them was a year older than the title character. He asked if it wasn't time for him to understand things at that age. But Elaine said they had been raised blowing palinkas off her, so their age didn't mean anything at all. This whole situation really annoyed and infuriated Rebes A. But the protagonist said it's nothing because worse things are in store for her from now on. She said that's why she had to man up. She said she shouldn't waste her energy on such trivialities. But at that moment, Rebes took out the entire staircase with magic. The protagonist was surprised and called the dragon's name. But Rebes A asked what. He asked if she wanted from Tug his use of magic. He told her not to dare tell him what to do. But the protagonist said that's not what she meant. She said she wanted to thank him. Rebes thought the protagonist was incurably obtuse. He didn't understand what had to have happened for her to be born on so stupid. He thought they had a lot of work ahead of them. After a while, the Countess welcomed the guests. She said she was very pleased to see them. Afterwards, the guests said that she has a very beautiful interior and this grandeur just amazes them. Rebes asked Elaine who they were. The protagonist said they were a good friend of her aunt's. She said that every month they went to visit each other. The dragon asked what they were doing. The main character said that they just drink tea and talk. She said that it was a way for people to get close to each other. At that moment, the protagonist thought that Karina had come on this very day. Karina Dardil. Yes, who had a direct hand in getting the protagonist chosen for sacrifice when she hadn't yet traveled back in time. She was the one who hated the protagonist from the very first seconds of her arrival at the temple. And also she became Lars's wife. Lane didn't understand why she hated her so much. As a child, the main character was hated by all members of the Newt family. However, she did not think that this could be a reason for hatred for her as well. At that moment, the Count came in and said he was a little late. But the guests said it was they who had come too soon. The Count laughed and said that's how it was. At that moment, Karina said that Mr. Lacker had become even more handsome during this time. This is the moment Rebes said that this girl seems to like the main character's cousin. He said that it's the reaction you get when you see someone you'd like to have sex with. The protagonist was very embarrassed by the dragon's words. She said it wasn't like that at all. She said that besides, they are still children, and you can't use such words towards children. Rebes asked, and then what it was called? The protagonist said that it was just that Karina liked Lars. Elaine said that the feeling of liking someone and wanting to have sex are very different things. But Rebes asked how they were different. Well, at this point, he asked Elaine if he was the one she was unrequitedly in love with. The main character said it happened. But Rebes asked if she liked that kind of thing. He said the guy didn't even look strong. He said the main character has strange tastes. Karina really liked Lars. She had once told Elaine so herself, but there was no need for that. It was noticeable to the untrained eye. She liked Lars as the main character. They allowed cousin marriages in their country. Besides, they weren't related by blood to Lars. However, whatever it was, he was reaching for her. But she continued to like him. Despite all that, the protagonist thought that maybe Karina knew about it. She thought maybe that's why she didn't like her so much. But the main character thought she didn't have a chance with Lars. Karina, on the other hand, had been ready for him since she was a child. Elaine thought that if she hated her already, she should be the one who disliked and envied her. The protagonist thought that if she couldn't forgive Lars, let alone love him, maybe this time things would work out differently, since she doesn't love Lars now. At that moment, the protagonist noticed that Lars was looking at her. At this point, the protagonist turned around and started to walk away. Rebes asked her what was wrong, and the protagonist said she'd better hurry up and go to her room while she was gone, scolded. The protagonist remembered how before the sacrifices, Lars had told her it wasn't a bad idea to use her as it was. She still lost her shivers at the coolness in his voice. She thought that for Lars, she had always been just a thing to be forgiven. Elaine didn't know how long she would keep such a man in her heart. After a while, the protagonist went to her room and lay down on her bed. Rebes asked her why she didn't want to kill them. He asked if she wanted revenge. He said that no matter how much he listened to her, but in that house, the only thing they did in those days was bullying. But the protagonist said that killing him wouldn't be the answer to all her problems. She said it's not the kind of revenge she wants. Rebes asked if she was telling the truth. He said that in his experience this was the best way. But the main character turned away from the dragon and said she wanted to rest. She thought she was very tired. At that moment, the protagonist heard laughter outside and thought that everyone must have gathered in the dining room. She didn't know if the day would come when she could laugh with someone. She had no friends in the past. The main character was neither an aristocrat nor a commoner. Therefore, she did not fit into any of the societies. That's how she lived her whole life alone. Elaine thought that's probably why she was sacrificed at the end, because no one would pay for her death. At this moment, the dragon lay down behind the protagonist. Elaine turned around and realized something. She realized she wasn't alone now. She figured Rebes would be with her until she made all 3 wishes. At that moment, there was a knock on the room. Elaine realized that there were 2 knocks on the door, which meant it wasn't Emily. Elaine stood up and asked who was there. The maid said she had been ordered to bring the main character. Rebes also woke up and asked what for. He asked Ah to say who asked for it. But Elaine realized it was her cousins too. She told the poet to the dragon. After a while, the protagonist came to her Kusa US. Her mother told her to come in and threw a cake at her. At that moment, Rebes used magic to change the trajectory of the cake's flight path. He got angry and asked what the hell else was going on. At that moment, Elaine realized that she had completely forgotten. Every time she was called into the living room and she suffered. The protagonist realized it had always been like this. It was common for these kids to bully her. But Elaine decided that now she would not silently accept their bullying. Mother asked Elaine why she was dodging. But the protagonist only laughed at him. The mother got angry and asked if she was laughing. He asked if she was laughing at him now. But she said how could she not laugh at someone like him? She said he calls her a coward even though he throws a cake at her. The mother got angry and asked her what language had appeared. He asked how dare she answer. But Elaine asked why he asked her here. She said it certainly wasn't to drink tea. But the mother said that if he said come, she should come. And if he said leave, she should leave. He asked why these stupid questions. But Elaine said her uncle told her not to leave the room. And she told cousin that if he got caught by a guest, he'd scold him for calling her. Martin wanted to say something, but Karina stopped him and told Elaine what she meant. She herself realizes she is not worthy of being seen by guests. Elaine was a little scared, but reassured herself that this wasn't the same Karina she had been in the past and told herself to hang in there. The protagonist said she knows and doesn't understand why she's still being kept in that house. She said it was very strange to see her. But at that moment, Karina asked her why she had suddenly dropped all the formalities. She said that the protagonist was practically a commoner. But Elaine said she'd told her off hundreds of times, ordering her not to do anything that would put the Newt family name on it. Karina said that the protagonist should have learnt manners then. But the main character said that she's also a member of the Newt family. She said that if she started acting like she was beneath Karine, it would make the whole Newt family beneath the Dardale family. At this point, Martin started shouting that the protagonist had lost her mind. He asked why she thought she was a member of their family. But Elaine said then they should take her out of the family at the registry yard. She said they could kick her out. But at that moment, silence hung in the air. Lars asked Elaine why she said to remove her from the family registry. The protagonist fell silent. At this point, Rebes told her to come to her senses. But Elaine just turned away from Lars in silence. At this point, Lars tells Martin to tell him who Elaine is if not a member of the Newt family. Martin said she was, but she's illegitimate. Lars said that's true. But he said that however Elaine's mother was also listed in the family register by her grandfather, and her father in turn consented to Elaine continuing her mother's line. He asked if Martin meant to say he was denying it. Martin got scared and said he wasn't. Lars said that if he wasn't, he should behave properly from now on. Lars said Elaine finally said something right. This is the moment he turned to the main character and told her to never speak of being removed from the family registry or kicked out of the house again, if she won't obey the head of the Nyut family. Lars had done things before that could be interpreted as supportive. Therefore, the protagonist's falling in love with him became inevitable. She was a person who could be conquered by the slightest sign of attention. However, Lars, having left her here and tied her to him in the end, had no other thoughts but to sell her, since the protagonist already knows the truth about him. Her love for him seemed to evaporate. However, she felt she had to tell the truth. At that moment, the protagonist said that whoever saw it would say it was strange. She said that recognized as a member of the Newt family, she had been working alongside the maid since morning. She said that not only was she forbidden to go outside her room, but she couldn't even eat properly. She asked what difference it would make if she was kicked out of here. At this point, Ellie told the main character that she was kind of weird today. But Elaine thought it wasn't strange for these kids when she couldn't say a word against them. She said if he had nothing more to say to her, she would go back. He said he wouldn't disturb their guests. Lars agreed and told her to come back because she must be tired. At that moment, a cake flew into Martin's face. Martin asked what it was, and Ellie said, "I don't know." She said she was trying to eat the cake and her hand slipped. She said she didn't want it to hit him. Elaine quickly turned round and said she would go. After she came out, she asked the dragon if it was definitely not his doing, but the dragon said it wasn't. Rebes asked the protagonist what she was sorry for. He said that if she wanted to, he could break them all right now, but Elaine said it wasn't right. Rebes got upset and said that it was because of all her voluntariness that he was holding himself up as best he could. He said he used to think young people could be tolerable, but now he'd changed his mind. But Elaine said that she had already said that there are people who are spoilt from childhood. Rebes said it was true, but he said that every time she refuses to let him trim all those cheesecakes off at the root. Elaine said it wouldn't be hard to kill all the people who bullied the days using the dragon's power, but she asked what's left for her. But the dragon said he didn't know. He said it must be joy. But Elaine said it wasn't even her revenge. She said she didn't even get remorse from them. She said that yes, they would die thinking that she had been unfair to them. Rebes asked Elaine what kind of place she wanted. The protagonist says she doesn't know yet, but she's sure she'll think of something. The dragon was already giddy at her kindness. He thought it was Martin who threw the cake at her, that arrogant girl. And the type who gave a pointless lecture, he didn't like any of them. However, among all of them, there's only one person he likes. This is the girl who does absolutely nothing. Seeing her reflecting, saying those confident words, Rebes could only temper his ardor by plunging the cake in this Martin's face. He thought it would be much better if the cake was bigger or if there was a fork and knife. But Rebes realized that without realizing it himself, he had decided to glue it together, meeting her eyes when she asked if it was him. It seemed to him that he would be sorry if she suddenly became disappointed in him. Rebes thought that whatever it was, he thought it would be enough that she didn't catch him. Malik was asleep in his bed. He dreamed again of that day, when Lancer Aquinal sealed the dark dragon Rebes A. Rebes A's face when it was sealed was full of disappointment. However, the moment Rebes A Lancer was sealed, the curse reached him, and he disappeared from that place. Malik didn't realize what curse was on him. At that moment, he woke up and realized why he was always having the same dream. He didn't like it. After he swallowed the dragonstone with the properties of foresight, he dreamed things before some important events. So there is most likely a reason why he is having this dream. Judging by the fact that there are still remnants of the strongest magic in the society, it can be assumed that among the dragons there is one, or maybe several with a huge power that can turn the world inside out. And Malik had no way of knowing what that power was. He remembered that this year is exactly 500 years. 500 years since Rebes was imprisoned. He thought maybe that's why he was dreaming about him. Of all the dragons Malik had met, Rebes was the only one who used his power so freely, strong magical abilities and an innate ability to use them. It all led to his bad temper. Therefore, his magnanimity to his contract girl elicited only laughter. Malik thought that these were useless thoughts. He thought that whatever Rebes was, he would not be free from his imprisonment. He thought he'd end up worrying about nothing. It's been 800 years since he started looking for the Dragonstone. Malik thought that if he had it along with the ether, he would have difficulty and take over the entire Earth. Malik didn't like Dragon Society, where the focus was on maintaining balance and peace. He asked the elders why they had to leave the land. He said they had enough to subdue the little people, and then they would be their gods. At first, Malik tried to persuade the elders and other dragons, but no one supported him. So he killed the elder and stepped into his shoes. As a result, he lost 90% of his magic core and was banished from Dragon Society. Malik thought he was too stupid at the time. He realized that he shouldn't have given so much energy to killing the elders. However, after losing the core of his magic, he learnt that it was possible to harness the magic of Dragonstone. One day, as he wandered in a weakened state of emptiness, feeding on the core of the mammals, carrying away the Dragonstone and mistaking it for mammals, at that moment everything changed. Malik's core, which was almost empty, was slightly filled. Find a few more stones, and the result was the same. He realized that the Dragonstone picked out the magic in you and then replenished it in you. Even after he replenished his core floor, his magic became even stronger when he ate dragon and stone. Malik realized that this was a discovery that none of the dragons were interested in, as he was actually eating the eggs of his own tribesmen. Malik loved it, since he was now stronger than the most powerful oldest dragon of the day, enslaving humans, and became even closer. Malik understood that the strong energy of a tribesman in the house of the Newt family and its bearer is definitely a dragon stone that holds unimaginable power. Malik thought that if he could just eat him, he could take out all the elders at once. He thought that maybe he could work the intermediate worlds as well. Rebes read that if he owned land and intermediate numbers, he could be called a god. He thought he could become a deity. After a while, Sasha knocked on Malik's room and said it was her. The boy told her to come in. After that, Sasha came in and said she missed you a lot. She told Malik that she had seen him, and she felt better immediately. Malik asked if she had come to see the emperor, but Sasha said she was very disgusted to please this old man. She said they couldn't make Abel emperor. Sasha said that Malik could turn the world upside down if he wanted to. But Malik said they needed this man for now. But Sasha told the guy not to worry, because he's on the emperor or it's an illusion spell. But at that moment, Malik told the girl that it seemed it wasn't just the emperor who was bothering her. Sasha asked how he knew her so well. She said it was because of Princess Aeneas. She said that every time she sees her, she feels sick. Sasha said they are identical women. However, one is born a princess of the empire and has the whole world under her feet, and the other is born a witch and lives her life looking over her shoulder every time. Sasha said she's stronger. She said she's worked herself to the bone and has more claim to this empire than Crown Princess Aeneas. But Malik asked if it wasn't because her power wasn't enough that she called him here. Sasha told him that if it wasn't for him, it would be very difficult to make Abel emperor. She said that if they continued like this, she would be the mistress of the empire, not Aeneas. So Sasha asked Malik to make Aeneas bow down to her as soon as possible. But Malik told the girl that there wasn't much left. He said he only needed one stone from the Nayut family home. He said that's why he would arrange a reason for Sasha to visit their home. The main character woke up and looked out the window and saw a huge pile of snow. Rebes asked if she really liked the snow. He asked if he should make it go harder. But Elaine said she would say no because she would have to sweep up all that snow anyway. Rebes asked why she would sweep it. But Elaine said she had to do all the hard work. But at this point, Elaine said it was very strange. She said it was snowing a lot and the maids should have woken her up a long time ago. She said it seems like they started working a long time ago. The protagonist said she needed to start working soon before she got scolded. After a while, Elaine went down to the street and was shoveling snow. Rebes asked if he could just melt all that snow. But the protagonist refused and said it was enough for her to sweep only the paths where people walk and carriages drive. She said that she also liked to watch the snow gather into a hill. Rebes said frustratedly that he never thought he would be begging his contractress to use his magic himself. The protagonist continued shoveling snow while the dragon watched her. But at this point, Rebes snapped and said he couldn't just watch it anymore. He told Elaine to back off. But at that moment, the protagonist told the dragon that someone was coming and threw it into the snow. At that moment, Lars appeared. Elaine asked him if something was wrong. But at that moment, the guy snatched the shovel from the protagonist. He told her not to do that sort of thing anymore. Elaine was surprised and asked what that meant. But Lars said what she heard. He told her not to do any more of the things that maids are supposed to do. Rebes thought the guy was a weasel. He didn't know what he was going to do. Elaine asked Lars why I was there all of a sudden. The guy explained that she was a recognized member of the Newt family. He said that's why she's not allowed to be involved in any maid business, as it could cause gossip and disrespect from the servants and other families. Lars said that he tells her not to do anything in the name of the family. The protagonist didn't realize whether it was impossible to think about it in advance before treating her like a servant. Elaine thought it had been almost 10 years. She didn't understand if the guy wanted to say that this case could have been fixed with just one word. The protagonist told the guy that she didn't choose to live like this, did she? But Lars told the protagonist that she had learnt to be sassy. But Elaine replied to the guy that if he didn't want her to be impertinent, first let him correct his habit of throwing all responsibility on her. At that moment, Lars realized that the protagonist had changed. He realized that not so long ago she couldn't say a word against him. She never peppered, and she spoke in such a way that you could barely hear her if you didn't listen. However, on the day Karina came to, she answered him. At this point, Elaine told Lars she was going. But at that moment, Lars grabbed her arm and stopped her. The protagonist asked fearfully what was wrong. The guy told her to change her clothes to something more appropriate, said that for her you'd really think she was a maid. But Elaine explained that these are the warmest clothes she has. Lars said he would go to the dressing room later to pick out his clothes. He said he'd tell her to pick up a couple of outfits for the main character too. Elaine said if he insisted, she wouldn't stop him. A little earlier, Lars had told his father that if he had given Elaine the surname Newt, he should treat her accordingly. He said that by ignoring that and treating her like a servant, they had made sure that the daughter of some Dardals mocked their family. The Count asked if Karina was mocking them. Lars explained that she looked down on Elaine, thinking she was already a daughter-in-law in their family. He said that in addition, Martin, Damon, and Ellie supported Karina's inappropriate behavior. The Count got angry and said he would punish them. By saying that, Lara changed his parents' minds, and his youngest, of course, was punished by his father. Lars thought that even after that, the protagonist still walks around with a shovel in her hands. She treats him differently. He didn't understand how she dared even think about running away from him. He thought it would never happen. When the protagonist came into the room, Rebes told her that last time she had trembled like a leaf in front of the guy, but today she had told him everything she wanted to. He said that apparently she wasn't so stupid after all. Elaine asked if he thought she was stupid. The dragon said, of course. He asked if it was stupid to take the long road when there was a shorter road. 20 Moments suddenly asked Rebes if he had already killed a lot of people like that. Rebes confirmed this. Elaine asked, and he liked it. But the dragon said he liked not killing people, but fulfilling the wishes of his contract girl. Elaine asked Rebes if his contractress had asked him to kill so many people. And Rebes said she did. He said she'd done it herself. At this point, the protagonist said that there was clearly something wrong with this man. And Rebes asked if she really thought so. He asked in what? The main character said that maybe her heart wasn't right. At this point, Rebes hesitated and Elaine asked him if everything was all right. But the dragon never answered that question and asked for the protagonist to hug him. Elaine took him in her arms and exchanged him. Then the dragon asked for her to pet him and also kiss him. The protagonist did as he asked but didn't realize why so suddenly. She realized that he seemed to be in a bad mood. At this point, Rebes asked Elaine she was being friendly to him, right? The main character was surprised and said of course. And Rebes asked if she was the same for others. But Elaine explained that she could only be so friendly with him. She said that the dragon knew how she lived. Rebes remembered that when Lancer was with him, she was always a kind and good person. He remembered that sometimes there were moments when she felt as if she had lost her soul. Rebes thought that maybe because of her heartache she could not trust him and betrayed him. But he had always trusted her. Rebes didn't know if he should think that Lancer wasn't stroking him because she didn't consider him a friend. He thought that compared to her, his current contractress stroked him as if she should. In fact, the dragon would like to get to know the main character better. Rebes landed near Elaine's head and thought that human faces were very strange. He couldn't get used to them. At this point, Rebes began to change his appearance to human and wondered what would happen if he too changed his appearance to human. He didn't realize if it would be even weirder. After Rebes turned into a human, he thought that humans had very uselessly long arms and legs. He thought they were also slow because they couldn't run on all fours. Rebes looked at the nails and thought that the name couldn't even kill a rabbit. At that moment, he looked at the main character and thought she looked better than before. Today, he's convinced that the protagonist is not as stupid as she seems. He thought that if they kept talking, maybe he would find out the reason why she didn't want to use his magic. Rebes didn't know the exact difference between Lancer and her, but he felt that the current contract girl was quite different, though similar in places to Lancer. Starting with the bullying she endured in this house. Thought she probably suffered like that in the temple too. However, Elaine's face doesn't have the scowl on it that Lancer had. Rebes thought that 500 years ago he might have wanted to see a Lancer like this at least once. Dragon started stroking the main character's hair and thought that Lancer was dark like him and Elaine was very light. He thought that in the sunlight she shone like gold and her green eyes looked like chrysolite. Rebes thought that compared to her, the Lancer had eyes as black as pitch. For kids, you'd think you were drowning in them. The dragon stroked Elaine and thought that he really liked it when she stroked him like that, but he realized that stroking someone was nice too. At that moment, the dragon wondered how much he might enjoy the kiss. Dragons also express affection by touching their heads or intertwining their tails, but the most pleasure is left when a couple licks each other. Of course, this only applies to lovers. And Rebes realized that a kiss was also something more intimate, so he was sure he would enjoy it. Rebes had already approached to kiss the protagonist, but at the last moment he got up. He thought it was very strange that the protagonist was just his contract girl, not even his lover, but for some reason he wanted to lick her. He thought it was a no-brainer every day. For 500 years being locked up, he longed for revenge on the Lancer. Ever since they went back in time, and it's like something is stopping Rebessa. He thought it was because the main character was so cute. He thought she was cute even when she was a Lancer. But at that moment, Rebes told himself to pull himself together. Afterwards, he ordered Hubert to come to him. After that, a man dressed as a butler appeared in front of Artem. He asked Rebesse if he had called him. This man Hubert family Mamul Rebesse. Rebes told Hubert that the county of Rindal would have to be erected. He said he had so spread the rumor of it. Hubert asked Rebes if he really wanted to use his human form. Rebes said he did because he needed him for now. At this point, Hubert cried, and Rebes asked what was wrong. Hubert explained that he had been waiting 500 years for him to return to the house, so he felt sad about the news. But Rebes told him to hurry up and fulfill his orders before he ate him. Hubert said he understood Rebesse. He said he would spread rumors about the heir to the county of Rindal Sars Rindal. The dragons were discussing what they should do about it. They said it couldn't just be left alone. One of the dragons said that it was natural for a black dragon to fall to the ground and turn back time. But the other dragon told the others to calm down. He said they would discuss it as soon as the elder came. The dragons have discussed that it's not an easy case, even though he's a dragon. Didn't realize that it could only be possible if ether was involved. They didn't realize that if the gods were to break out over this, the dragons would be the first to suffer. At that moment, the blue dragon heard someone say that one should not underestimate the strength of the Ratel. At this point, the dragon thought he hadn't heard that name in a while. Ratel is a very powerful dragon that is hard to see. She is the dragon that struck the troubled black dragon. No one would have thought that such a strong Ratel would fall in love with a weak katana. The love of these two dragons went through many hardships, and in the end did not last long. Catan, sent on an expedition to Middle-earth, was killed in a battle with a Mamul. After that, Ratel did not consider another candidate for a mate. Instead, she gathered her katana strength within herself and continued on with her business. Ratel was told not to do anything stupid, not told that she wouldn't be able to give birth and carry an egg with that kind of strength. She was told that the Catan wouldn't want that either, but Ratel said she wanted it. She said it was her wish. She said she wanted to leave evidence that the katana had once lived. No one could stop the determined Ratel. So the Ratel laid an egg. Using her power on it, disappeared after the katana. The egg that Ratel traded her life for turned out to be deformed. It was left behind because the dragons thought it would not go out. The egg that Ratel had used all her strength on could not be ordinary. At this moment, an elder flew in with a dragon. The dragons asked him what they should do about the situation. The elder told them to calm down first. He said that when the egg fell to the ground, he knew it was special. At this point, the dragon asked the elders did he really know what it was for such a mess. The elders said he didn't know how, but he was sure he would give them trouble. The blue dragon asked the elders why, then he told them to leave him and go away. But the elder said it was his destiny. He said the dragon couldn't be with them. The elder said that if only to keep the world of dragons and humans separate, he should be there. The elder said that this black dragon would be recorded in human history as the last dragon.